Life was always a struggle for people like us who didn't have much to spare. That particular day, we were reminded of our difficult situation in the most painful way. I couldn't believe the cruel words coming from Rachel, my sister-in-law. She was never shy about voicing her disapproval of things, but this time, her words hit harder than usual. Rachel had secretly hidden a gift meant for her daughter, Angela. It was a present Angela had put so much thought and care into, yet now Rachel was turning it away as if it didn't matter. Without a moment's hesitation, she criticized Angela's gift right in front of her, treating it as if it was worthless. To Rachel, if a gift didn't have a famous brand name, it wasn't good enough. On the floor lay a pair of earrings Angela had carefully chosen, now scattered and being picked up by other kids. Angela stood frozen in shock, unable to understand what was happening, before her tears began to flow. At just 10 years old, it was too much to bear. The atmosphere in the room turned even colder when my mother-in-law laughed at Angela's tears, and Rachel seemed pleased by her distress, but their moment of cruel satisfaction didn't last long. "I'm Shirley, and I've spent my life working part-time jobs to support my precious daughter, Angela. She's 10 now, born from my first marriage, which ended tragically when my husband died in a car accident when Angela was just 5. In the midst of my grief, I made a promise to myself that I would do everything I could to raise Angela well. After years of struggle, I met Anthony at work. Even though life was tough as a single mom, Anthony's kindness and support for both Angela and me gave us hope. He became a light in our lives, and over time, Angela began to open up to him. It marked the beginning of a new chapter for us. Despite the struggles and judgment we faced, we found strength in our love for each other. Anthony entered our lives gently, first as a friend and eventually as a father figure. Angela, at first unsure, slowly grew to love him and started calling him Dad. She was happy with him, and it brought warmth into our home. Anthony opened up to us about his infertility, but instead of pushing us away, he shared that he saw Angela as his own and loved her deeply. His vulnerability only strengthened our bond. His care for Angela, especially during times when she was sick, showed me how much he truly loved us, and that was enough. His inability to have biological children didn't change how much he cared for us. Eventually, we decided to move in together and got married when Angela turned 10. My father-in-law welcomed our marriage with open arms, treating Angela like his own granddaughter, which made her feel loved and accepted. However, things weren't the same with my mother-in-law. She had always blamed me for every little thing that went wrong in the house, from missing dishes to a tiny speck of dust. It seemed as though nothing I did was good enough. But it wasn't just my mother-in-law. Rachel, Anthony's older sister, was also a source of tension. She lived nearby, so her visits were frequent. On the other hand, we lived a bit farther away and could only visit occasionally. Rachel, craving attention, often used these visits to put me down, flaunting her material wealth. While our family had modest means, Rachel never missed an opportunity to point out what we couldn't afford. We had roots in Minneapolis, far from our new life in West Virginia, and it often felt like we were on our own without support from extended family. My part-time job and simple lifestyle meant that luxury items were beyond our reach, but Rachel made sure to remind me of that. While Rachel and I both worked part-time jobs, it was clear that her family had more financial resources. She would often show off outfits worth thousands of dollars while her children wore simple, everyday clothes. This made it clear that we had different values. While Rachel spent money on herself, I focused on making Angela happy, even if it meant living with less. Dealing with the constant negativity from my mother-in-law and Rachel was draining. Angela, still so young, often withdrew when they came over, retreating to her room to watch videos whenever they visited. It hurt to see her caught in the middle of all the adult tension. She seemed to instinctively avoid them, even though she tried to stay polite. Despite the strain, my father-in-law was a constant source of support. He didn't approve of Rachel's behavior and often intervened when things got heated. Anthony, too, didn't have many fond memories of his sister, often sharing stories of how selfish she had been growing up. Since moving out, Anthony had limited his visits home, mostly to allow his parents time with Angela, avoiding unnecessary interactions with Rachel. Interestingly, Angela and Rachel's children got along well, which was a bright spot amidst all the tension. It was a reminder that the children's friendships should remain unaffected by the adult disagreements. Thanks to Anthony and my father-in-law, we managed to keep a civil distance from Rachel, making the rare family gatherings more tolerable. As Angela grows older, I expect these visits will become even less frequent, and we'll have to be patient. The holiday season brought another opportunity to interact with the family. Rachel had invited us to a Christmas party she organized. With help from my father-in-law, he made sure to include Angela, knowing how much she loved such gatherings. The timing was perfect, both Anthony and I had the day off, so we decided to go with Angela. Christmas parties always involve gift exchanges, and we knew we couldn't afford to be extravagant, but we planned to contribute something thoughtful. Rachel, however, had made it clear that she expected only expensive gifts. She included a list of preferred items in the invitation, all of which were luxury brands worth over $200 each, far beyond what we could afford. It felt as though the list was more for Rachel's benefit than for the children. Still, we encouraged Angela to choose a gift from her heart, and after several shopping trips, she picked out a pair of earrings and some colorful erasers, totaling around $75. It wasn't as lavish as Rachel's request, but it was meaningful. The party itself was warm and festive. Rachel's children had made handmade decorations, and my father-in-law, a former chef, prepared a beautiful meal with a roast chicken and a decorated cake. The children enjoyed the festivities in the living room, while the adults gathered in a smaller room to chat. Rachel's husband was absent, and Rachel kept her distance from me, as I did from her. When it came time for the gift exchange, Angela eagerly gave her presents to Rachel's daughter, who received them with joy. It was clear that the expensive items Rachel had insisted upon weren't important to her daughter. The children enjoyed the gift exchange, laughing and playing a traditional game, but a problem arose when a gift seemed to be missing, causing confusion among the kids. As I searched, Rachel stormed into the room. Furious, she accused Angela of hiding the gift and demanded we leave. Her outburst shocked everyone, revealing her true feelings and creating a tense situation. However, despite the chaos, it was evident that the real joy of the evening came from the children's happiness, not the material things. Rachel's rejection of Angela's gift was heartbreaking, but it highlighted the differences in our values. It also showed the importance of love, understanding, and kindness, qualities Rachel seemed to lack. Just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any worse, my father-in-law stepped in with surprising passion, defending Angela and scolding Rachel for her cruelty. I had never seen my mother-in-law, who often joined in with Rachel's mocking and harsh behavior, become silent like she did when my father-in-law spoke up. It turns out that my father-in-law and Anthony, who don't drink alcohol, had quietly witnessed the entire scene. Anthony had shared with his father how Rachel was demanding expensive, brand-name gifts for the party, which led to my father-in-law confronting the issue with anger. He was disappointed with Rachel's materialistic attitude and made sure to address it at that moment. In the midst of all the tension, something unexpected happened. Rachel's own children began to show kindness and support to Angela. They saw how upset she was and tried to comfort her. Despite their mother's objections and her attempts to pull them away, worried they might be influenced by Angela's poverty, the kids ignored her. Instead, they stayed close to Angela, offering their support, almost as if they were silently protesting against the way Rachel and my mother-in-law had been treating her. This moment of unity among the children took Rachel and my mother-in-law by surprise, especially because they hadn't expected the children to act with such compassion. At that point, my father-in-law saw an opportunity to teach a lesson. He gathered the kids and shared a story about Rachel's past, explaining how she had always been drawn to material things. He told them how, when Rachel was younger, she had worked in jobs where image and money were prioritized over character. This had led to her obsession with luxury brands. The story was a reminder of how the values we choose to live by shape us, and how our actions impact those around us. Rachel had always struggled financially, yet she kept buying expensive things for years. During her third year of university, my father-in-law had discovered that she was secretly working at a nightclub to fund her expensive habits. He had confronted her and told her to quit the job or face being kicked out of the house. This was the one and only time my father-in-law ever raised his voice at her. After that, Rachel took a job as a supermarket cashier before moving to an office job where she met her future husband. But even after marrying, her desire for luxury never went away, and this caused constant tension between her and her husband, who believed in living within one's means. When Rachel made those lavish gift suggestions for our family, it became clear that those were items she actually wanted for herself. When she was confronted about how she could afford such luxuries with a part-time job, she claimed it was due to her working extra shifts. However, this claim fell apart when my father-in-law exposed her hidden debt. That revelation left Rachel speechless and deflated. The whole situation overshadowed the Christmas party, and we decided to leave early to avoid further upsetting the children and tarnishing their holiday spirit. On our way home, we decided to buy Angela her favorite stuffed animal to cheer her up and celebrate quietly as a family. Months later, we found out that Rachel's marriage had ended in divorce. Her husband had discovered the mountain of debt she had hidden from him, including the cancellation of their children's education insurance to fund her luxury purchases. As a result, Rachel had a falling out with his family, and eventually, she was disowned by them. Her children, now teenagers, chose to live with their father. Rachel struggled to keep up with alimony and child support payments, though her ex-husband made sure their children's financial needs were met, even though raising 3 kids on his own was tough. I considered offering help with the children's education, especially with my research into online learning. Anthony, who has always had a good rapport with kids, agreed to support them in their studies at their father's request. This not only helped with their education but also allowed us to strengthen the bond between our families, offering a bit of hope during tough times. 9 months after the divorce, I was still receiving angry messages from Rachel. She continued to blame others for her problems, including Anthony and her own children, accusing them of not appreciating her efforts. She insisted that they would regret their decisions and called the divorce a grave injustice. Rachel had moved back into her parents' house, and my mother-in-law, despite Rachel's erratic behavior, continued to support her. This shift in my mother-in-law's attitude, from criticizing Rachel to defending her no matter what, raised suspicions in my father-in-law. Sensing something was wrong, he decided to investigate what had been going on. It wasn't long before he uncovered the truth. After a long break from visiting my in-laws, Anthony and I went back to their house. Our visits had become rare because my father-in-law often came to visit us instead. When we arrived at the house, which once felt warm and inviting, we discovered something shocking. We found documents showing debts in my father-in-law's name, debts that were clearly not his doing. It was a revelation that left us completely confused, considering my father-in-law's normally frugal ways. Caught off guard by our presence, Rachel and my mother-in-law arrived home to find us going through the evidence of their financial misdeeds. My father-in-law, with a calm but firm presence, stepped in. He separated Anthony from an agitated Rachel and revealed the full extent of their financial mess. Not only had Rachel accumulated debt in her father's name after exhausting her own credit, but it was also revealed that my mother-in-law had been spending their retirement savings on luxury items along with Rachel. The savings my father-in-law had worked so hard for over the years, about $2.5 million, had been wiped out in just 4 years. In fact, they now faced a debt of around $2.8 million. Rachel and my mother-in-law tried to deflect the blame, making excuses and blaming Rachel's ex-husband for everything, but my father-in-law had all the facts. In a bold move, he handed my mother-in-law a divorce form and told her that his regret in life was ever being associated with her. He also disowned Rachel as his daughter. The sight of the divorce papers sent my mother-in-law into a panic. This was a turning point in the family's story, where denial and blaming others finally gave way to harsh reality. Afterward, my mother-in-law begged Rachel to apologize, but Rachel refused, refusing to take responsibility for her actions. The situation escalated, and my father-in-law, having had enough, decided to leave. Rachel, once so defiant, became anxious as she realized the severity of her actions. Later that evening, when Anthony and I were trying to relax at home, Rachel unexpectedly showed up at our doorstep, much later than acceptable. Anthony, trying to handle the situation, faced Rachel's indignation. It became clear that after a fallout with my mother-in-law, Rachel had nowhere to go. She tried to stay at her ex-husband's home, but he turned her away, and so, she came to us, unwilling to pay for a place to stay. Anthony firmly refused to let her in, threatening to call the police if she didn't leave. Rachel, however, continued to create a scene until we had no choice but to follow through on our threat. The police came, and Rachel's angry words echoed into the night. Over time, it became obvious that Rachel's refusal to reflect on her actions had destroyed her relationships. At nearly 60 years old, it seemed unlikely that she would ever change her deep-seated habits. The fallout left Rachel and my mother-in-law isolated and struggling with debt. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, grateful for the support we had given him, began rebuilding his life. He found a new place to live and even took a job as a taxi driver to support himself. Rachel's children continued to stay in touch with their grandfather, offering a small comfort amid the chaos. This whole experience made me reflect on the real value of money and possessions. The next Christmas, when we visited my father-in-law's new home, it was a reminder of this shift in perspective. Gifts weren't chosen for their brand names, but for the love and thoughtfulness behind them. This incident showed us all that it's not the material things we have that matter, but the values we live by and the relationships we build. As Angela remains close with Rachel's children, I hope they'll learn from their mother's mistakes, choosing a life of gratitude and humility over materialism.